All right, hey, this is Jordan Krueger, and this is my Peeps family tree. This was actually a lot of fun because I don't really know a lot about where I come from. So if you start on the far right, this is me. I was born July 3rd, 1993 in Raleigh, North Carolina. I am a second grade teacher. Um, I don't know how we got to North Carolina, so I'd have to ask that too. My mom and my dad, my mom was Tracy. She was born in 1972 in Chillicothe, Missouri, and I guess we'll just trace her side back first, and then we will go to my dad's side. My mom is a pharmacy technician, but she's had a lot of jobs over the years. She's the youngest in a blended family. She has 4 to 5 brothers and sisters, depending on how you cut it that day, and all different dads. One of them a different mom. So it's a big blended family, which has made for fun extended family gatherings. Um, Her dad's name was Clyde Wilson. He is currently who I lived with. Well, not currently who I live with, but who I have lived with before. I can't stop it. He went to high school and graduated in 1965, so his 50-year reunion is coming. Um, he was in the Air Force, and he was also a Navy Seabee. If you hear him today, he'll only talk about that Navy Seabee part. But I learned that he went to a lot of really interesting places. Gulfport, Bermuda, Mexico. I listed a bunch of them. I did not know that he went all of those places. My mom lived in Bermuda for 3 years as a kid, and she lived in Mexico City for 4 years. My mom didn't really grow up in the United States. Most of her elementary school career was spent in different countries, which was great because she didn't speak any other languages other than English. And I remember her talking about how that was the most frustrating thing because I think they were actually in Mexico when she went to high school. And she said that the first assignment she was given in a Mexico City public school was to write a synopsis of the movie The Terminator in Spanish. And she told her teacher that she didn't know how to speak Spanish or write in Spanish. And her teacher told her that that was unfortunate because that's what she's going to have to do. So that was a really interesting perspective and the opposite of what we normally hear it, where people don't speak English, but we expect them to. So it was kind of interesting to see it work in the other way. Her mom's name was Patricia Howe. I called her Nan. She was born in 1943 and she got a GED. My Nan was a very strong woman. She ran an office at the National Treasury. She worked at the DEA for as long as I can remember. And I mean, obviously, if you'll notice, I didn't remember her for very long. My Nan unfortunately passed away when I was 3 in a car accident. She was from Chillicothe, Missouri, which, as you'll notice as you go back, this is where the Missouri section of my family lived. My dad's name was Bobby Lang Wilson. He was a tree trimmer for Kansas City Tree Trimming, and he was also a World War II vet. I remember I met him. I don't have his death or his date of death here, but I did meet him a few times when I was younger. He arrived just after Normandy and was stationed in France, England, and Germany. His mom's name was Rama Ellen Head. She was a waitress from Kansas City, and I remember my grandpa said that she actually worked a bunch of odd jobs, but she was predominantly a housewife. My grandpa was the oldest boy of 10, all except for one of which are still with us. So, again, lots of fun family gatherings. He remembered not much about his grandparents outside of their names and their occupations. So there's a lot of farmer, blue collar, salvage route, basically he was a trash man, and a lot of housewife. We see that a lot on my grandpa's side of that family. Now when you get into my Nan's side, we don't know much about them only because her siblings are no longer with us and neither is she, so it's a little bit harder to trace it back. We do know, though, that her dad's name was Homer Vernon Howe, and my mom remembers him pretty well, said he was a Pentecostal preacher, and he also owned an airplane. Fun fact, he actually married his got his son married in his plane, and it was the first ever marriage in the state of Missouri that took place on a plane, which was pretty cool. Um, I don't know why he owned a plane or how he came to know how to fly it, but he was a Pentecostal preacher who liked to fly planes. And his wife, Claire Dean, was a housewife. So then when you get on to my paternal side of the family, my dad was born in Pensacola, Florida. He is an inventory controller and the oldest of two boys. He was also a Navy brat. I call him Ia, but my paternal grandfather's name is Larry Krueger Sr. He is a Navy vet. He actually worked in the medic department of the Navy. He was also stationed all over. I didn't find out until after I had saved it. But he was stationed as far as Quantico to Italy. My dad grew up for about 7 years in Italy, from the time he was in second grade, I believe, until the time he was in ninth. And Ia actually worked in Antarctica for the first 3 years of my dad's life, so he didn't even see my dad until he was almost 3 because he was stationed in Antarctica, and he has some fun stories about the penguins. He currently still works as a radiologist in Gulf Shores, Alabama. He's also the first person that we see in my family who has more than a high school degree. My dad did go back and get an AA as well, but my Ian on this side, he does have an associate's degree so that he could be a radiologist. And he was born in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Now, his mom and dad are where we kind of go blank in my family. All we know from his dad is his dad's name is Walburn Krueger, and he was a German immigrant. He's kind of the family phantom. I wrote that because my Ian never met him, but he knows that he was a brewer for Anheuser-Busch who had originally lived in New Jersey and married my grandfather's mom, Julia Heido, in the early 1940s. My grandfather is the youngest of 3, so his oldest brother had actually met Walburn, but didn't ever really know him. We found out recently that he had passed away in Florida, and after a little bit of research, I did happen to come across where his gravesite is, and found out he was remarried, all that fun stuff. But his wife's name was Julia Heido, and I have memories of Julia. She was a very harsh woman. God bless her. She was a first-generation Slovakian immigrant born to Zeta Heido and Buba Heido. And she built bombs for World War II, which is where she actually met the man that she remarried, who ended up basically raising my grandfather, and his name was Dave Kilgallen, and he was a guard at the steel factory that she built bombs. And later on, she became a nurse's aide. She was born in Pennsylvania. So this half of my family was really, or I won't say half, this quarter of my family was really more New England than the rest of my family. We don't know anything about where Walburn came from. I have looked and looked and can't find it. It would just take a lot of legwork to find it, which I'll probably end up doing because now I'm really interested. And I don't know anything else about Zeta Heido or Buba Heido outside of the fact that they were both Slovakian immigrants who came over right around the time World War I was beginning. And then if you go down, my Meemaw on this side, her name is Lee Gentry. She is the youngest of 10 children from Pensacola, Florida. Education is a GED, but she has also gone back, I think, recently to get her AA. My Meemaw loves school, and she is currently trying to figure out the online thing just like me. Her mom and her dad were both from Florida as well. Vashti Reeves was her mother, born to William Reeves, who they called Billy Reeves, and Sarah Ellen, who is a full-blooded Seminole Indian. Her dad was also an Irish immigrant, so that was a really interesting pair to me. Vashti was not educated. Meemaw said that she never remembered her talking about going to school. Not to say that she didn't, but if she did, she never ever talked about it. And she was obviously Native American and Irish. And her father's name was John Gentry. I have never heard very positive stories about him outside of the fact that he was a merchant marine who who around the time of World War II got into construction. He decided he wanted to be a farmer. Meemaw said he wasn't very good at it, but decided that's what he wanted to do. Um, and really, apparently, my Meemaw's siblings did most of the farming, but he had alcohol problems and was apparently just not a very nice man. um, so that's really all I know about him, other than the fact that he was born to Wesley Gentry and Mary Ethel Douglas, both from Florida. They don't know how far back it goes to immigration, but Meemaw said they were both very English. Their families, um, I mean, nationally looked English. I think she said she remembered like a distant cousin who had the accent, but we don't know is exactly how far back generationally it would go until you found some sort of first generation immigration. She said that they were the only ones, though, who really owned any businesses or did anything like that. They owned a grocery store on Ninth Avenue in Pensacola, which is still standing, obviously not still owned by them, but it is still there. So that's actually really interesting to me to look at all of this and see that this is kind of how I came to be, especially interesting to see all of the different places they came from and to see that a lot of my family was very regional. And it wasn't until my mom and my dad that we saw any of these way far away regions start to come together. Um, so that's really it. Everyone in my family is from European descent outside of the dabbles of Seminole here and there. I know that this particular grandmother's mother was Cherokee to some extent. So that's kind of where I come into play. I definitely take after the European side of my family. Um, Pale, fair when I want to make myself feel better. Fair skinned, blue eyed, blonde headed is just kind of where I ended up falling. I definitely favor this string right here. I definitely favor the Krueger string. Don't so much look anything like my mother's side. Everybody in my family speaks English. I don't know of anybody who speaks any other languages, even living in all of the different places that they ended up. There was never really any desire to speak a different language. That is really all I can think of. But this was a super exciting assignment, and I can't wait to watch everyone else's.